Because this question is, did Christ die the second or eternal death in my place?
So it depends on your law construct. See, people with imperialism, people with the somebody had to pay my penalty mindset, they're terrified that Christ didn't die the second death. Because if he didn't die the second death, then my penalty's not paid, and I'm going to have to die the second death. So they insist on Christ dying the second death. So to answer a question like that, you have to first understand God's law, and then you have to actually let the Bible define its own terms. Go to Scripture and actually do a word study of second death. You will find it's defined in several ways in different places. One place, the second death, is the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. Did Christ die in the lake of fire?
No.
He did not. The second death defined is the death from which there is no resurrection. That's another way it's defined in Revelation chapter 20. Did Christ die a death from which he did not rise?
No.
In fact, Paul says if Christ does not rise, we are pitiful. We're pitiful people. No, so that definition doesn't fit. Jesus in Matthew 10:28 said, don't be afraid of the one who can destroy the body, first death, but cannot destroy the body and soul, Greek word for soul, psyche, your individuality, your personhood. That's second death. Second death is where not only your body is destroyed, but your own identity, individuality is also destroyed. Did Christ, when he died on the cross, have his identity and individuality destroyed?
No.
Or did the angels actually say to the apostles, this same Jesus, this is the same Jesus that you knew and rose again. His identity was intact. His individuality was intact. Christ, if you contrast the two deaths, of the death of the wicked in the end and the death of Christ on the cross, you will actually notice they're almost exactly opposite. Christ died longing to see his Father's face. The wicked die begging to be hidden from the Father's face. Christ died trusting his Father. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. The wicked die distrusting the Father. Christ dies when love overcomes selfishness. He surrendered himself in love to overcome the temptation to save self. The wicked die overcome by selfishness. These are exact opposite experiences. Though Christ died when the Father separated himself from Christ, as I said a moment ago. The wicked die when, by the brightness of his coming, and when God's eternal, our God is a consuming fire, life-giving fiery presence consumes them. It's exact opposites. Here's the biggest one, though, and I gave you the text earlier. In Timothy, by his death, Christ destroyed death and brought life and immortality to light. Those who teach that Christ died the second death, if you understand what it is, he would have been destroyed by that death. Instead, Christ destroyed death. He was not destroyed by death. So I believe Christ destroyed death and destroyed the cause of death, and thus he overcame death. But if you have a legal model, none of that makes sense because it's a penalty, and the penalty is eternal death, and somebody had to pay the penalty, so Jesus had to die it. It's very mathematically simple, but it actually doesn't actually make sense to the evidence that we have been given in Scripture.